Welcome back to the channel where today we're going to be doing another reaction video, and we have Professor John Lennox going to be giving his reasoning why he believes that there is a God. And actually at the end of the video, he's going to be giving his reason for why he believes that the God of the Bible, and in particular Jesus of Nazareth, is the one that we should be following. If you enjoy these types of videos, these reaction videos, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Let's hop into the video. Let's see what he has to say, and we'll make some comments at the end.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not ashamed of being both a scientist and a Christian, because arguably Christianity gave me my subject. What I am amazed at is that serious thinkers today continue to ask us to choose between God and science. That's like asking people to choose between Henry Ford and engineering as an explanation of the motor car. When Newton discovered his law of gravity, he didn't say, I've got a law, I don't need God. No, he wrote the Principia Mathematica, arguably the greatest work in the whole history of science, because he saw that God is not the same kind of explanation as a scientific explanation. God doesn't compete. Agency does not compete with mechanism and law. Why is there something rather than nothing? Alan Sandage, the brilliant cosmologist who became a Christian in his 50s, said God is the answer to that question. But people are now so desperate to show that the universe created itself from nothing, which seems to me to be an immediate oxymoron. If I say X created Y, I'm assuming the existence of X to explain the existence of Y. If I say X created X, I'm assuming the existence of X to explain the existence of X, which simply shows that nonsense remains nonsense even if high-powered scientists utter it. It reminds me a little bit of G.K. Chesterton, who said, "It is absurd to complain that it is unthinkable for an unthinkable God to make everything out of nothing, and then to pretend that it is more thinkable that nothing should turn itself into everything." The heavens declare the glory of God, says the ancient psalm. And we've unraveled a bit of that, seeing the fine-tuning of the fundamental forces of nature. It's something that's so striking to scientists that it demands explanation. And it seems to me that Arno Penzias hit it right. He is the Nobel Prize winner who discovered the microwave background on which a lot of the evidence for the Big Bang is based. He said astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with the very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the right conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. But I want to come to what I think is one of the fundamental arguments for theism. I take it this house believes in reason. That's why we're all here. And as a scientist, I believe that the universe is rationally intelligible. That is something that has struck some of the geniuses of science as demanding an explanation. Einstein said the only incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. And Wigner talked about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. How is it that a mathematician thinking in her head in here can come up with equations that seem to fit the universe out there? Well, how is it indeed? Because the irony of the atheist position here is evident. My atheist friends, and I have many of them, tell me that the driving force of evolution, which eventually produced our human cognitive faculties, reason included, was not primarily concerned with truth at all, but with survival. And we all know, ladies and gentlemen, what has often happened and still happens to truth when individuals or commercial enterprises or nations feel themselves threatened and struggle for survival. Leading philosopher Alvin Plantinga of Notre Dame says, if atheists are right that we are the product of mindless, unguided natural processes, then they have given us strong reason to doubt the reliability of human cognitive faculties, and therefore inevitably to doubt the validity of any belief that they produce, including their atheism. Their biology and their belief in naturalism would therefore appear to be at war with each other in a conflict that has nothing at all to do with God. Yet my atheist friends still insist that it is rational for them to believe that the evolution of human reason was not directed for the purpose of discovering truth. And yet, it is irrational for me to believe that human reason was designed and created by God to enable us to understand and believe the truth. Curious logic. By contrast with that, biblical theism asserts that ultimate reality is personal and intelligent, and the reason science works, and this was the motivating force that drove the great pioneers of science, is that the universe out there and the human mind in here that does the science are ultimately the product of the same intelligent divine mind. Human beings are made, we are told, in God's image. And that means that science can be done. That makes infinitely more sense to me as a scientist than atheism does. Now, let me come briefly to ethics. Ethical behavior, like rational behavior, of course, does not itself require religious belief. This is consistent with the fact that humans are created in God's image as rational moral persons. But just as I suggest that rationality cannot be explained without the existence of God, so I dare to suggest that the existence of morality cannot be explained either. As modern science sprang from Judeo-Christian sources, so did the concept of human equality. Listen to atheist Jürgen Habermas, arguably one of Germany's leading intellectuals. He said that universalistic egalitarianism, from which sprang the ideals of freedom and a collective life and solidarity, the individual morality of conscience, human rights, and democracy, is the direct legacy of the Judaic ethic of justice and the Christian ethic of love. This legacy, substantially unchanged, has been the object of continual critical appropriation and reinterpretation. To this day, there's no alternative to it. Everything else is just idle postmodern talk. And it seems to me he's hitting the core of something important, because the value of a human being on which such egalitarianism rests is based not on what the human being can do, but what she's made of, or how she's made in God's image. I never forget speaking on one of my many visits to Russia to a colleague in the Academy of Sciences. And he said, "You know, John, we thought we could abolish God and retain a value for human beings. We found we couldn't, and we murdered millions of them." And Alexander Solzhenitsyn has said, "If I'm asked, why is it that 60 million of my fellow countrymen were sacrificed?" He said, the answer is, we have forgotten God. Science, of course, marvelous as it is limited. Even a Nobel Prize winner, by analyzing a cake, cannot tell why it was made. But Aunt Matilda, who made it, can tell you. She can reveal it to you. But if she doesn't reveal it to you, you'll never know. And that brings me to my next evidence. It's the same with the universe. We can analyze it magnificently. But ultimately, if it has a maker, and I believe it has, only he can tell us what it's all about. And he's done so in the powerful narrative of the Bible, in particular in its analysis of the problem with humanity, not simply in terms of behavioral breakdown between people, but a vertical breakdown of trust between us and the Creator. The unique solution to that problem is not simply in terms of human ethical development, although that's very important, but in terms of something far deeper altogether. The restoration of the fractured relationship with God through the salvation he has brought through Jesus Christ. A radical relationship that empowers us to live ethically from God. And here we reach what for me is the chief evidence, not only for the existence, but the nature of God. It is Jesus Christ. He it was who not only taught the golden rule, but embodied it, fed the hungry, healed the sick and suffering, and welcomed society's outcasts, brought honor and respect to the marginalized and ashamed. And he's brought forgiveness and peace to multi-millions around the world. He's able to do this, of course, because though he was a man, he uniquely never was only a man, but God become human. The central evidence for this startling claim is, of course, his historical resurrection from the dead that launched Christianity in the world. This is, of course, ladies and gentlemen, a crunch issue. If Jesus rose from the dead, death is not the end and atheism is false. If Jesus did not rise from the dead, Christianity is false. And I remember at Cambridge as a student listening to the brilliant Sir Norman Anderson, a legal expert, going through forensically the evidence from his legal perspective as a brilliant lawyer. And he said at the end of it, the empty tomb then of Jesus forms a veritable rock on which all rationalistic theories of the resurrection dash themselves in vain.
Okay, wow. What a clip from Professor John Lennox. For him to pack all of that into this essentially 10 minutes that we're looking at here is really quite incredible. And I think just shows the amount of rationality that we have in believing that there is indeed a God and in believing that Jesus is the one that we should be following. So not just the existence of a God, but which God should we be following? And he gives the explanation for why we should be following Jesus. So we're not going to look at every single point he makes, but let's break down a few of these points just for further clarity so that we make sure that we really grasp what's being said and it continues to provoke our thoughts as we move forward. So I'll give really just 4 brief points that Professor John Lennox made that I did find really interesting. And the first one comes from kind of this really false choice that we're being pushed to choose between science and God. A lot of people want us to choose between science and God. They say that there's not any harmony between the two, and that is simply not the case. This is just indeed a false choice from the beginning. Part of the reason why this is a false choice is because science explains and can explain, at least in many cases, and has explained in many cases, how something works. It can describe the environment of something and how it operates, but it doesn't explain why it does that way, at least in a philosophical sense. Why are we on this earth in the first place? So science can explain the how, but religion, and in particular the biblical narrative, explains the why. That's why these two are in harmony. So if we're being asked to choose between the two, I think this is a false assumption and a false choice from the beginning. Professor Lennox also mentioned that agency doesn't compete with mechanism and law. Or in other words, our agency, as free moral agents, our ability to choose things and why we choose those things is not in the same category of competition as mechanism and law, or why there are laws in the universe and how these mechanisms in our universe work. These are two separate things. They're complementary to each other in many ways, but they're not to be taking one place over the other. One does not explain the other in that sense. It doesn't overtake the other. They work together to give us a complete picture between the reasons of why we do the things that we do versus how the world works and the mechanism of law, and of course our agency and our free will. These things work complementary together to help give us this picture of how the world operates and what we're doing here. And I think this is the point also that he asked. Why something rather than nothing? So science might be able to describe the something to whatever degree, but why is there something rather than nothing would be a very logical question to ask. And we need to be able to provide answers to this if there are indeed answers that can be provided. And this is the point that he's making. So no, science and religion don't have to work against each other. They can complement each other. The next point that he makes is basically if atheists are right, or if, as Richard Dawkins has said, if the mind is just guided by these and evolved by these unguided processes, the mind is this evolution of these unguided processes over a period of time, then Professor John Lennox basically brings up via the quote of Alvin Plantinga of Notre Dame, why would we trust our mind in the first place if my mind and our minds are simply just an evolution of these unguided processes? Then are we certain that the way that we use our rationale is indeed valid? The point being, if our minds are developed through this random unguided process of evolution, then we can't even trust ourselves. We can't really know anything if that is the case. The third point that Professor Lennox makes is that if there is indeed a creator, then we should be looking to the creator for the answers as to how we got here and why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing while we're here. Now, I understand that there may be some that, of course, believe, there may be atheists, for example, that believe that we don't have a creator. But for the sake of understanding the arguments, if one were to take the position that there is no God, one should at least take the position that as if there were a God, if there was indeed a God, what would he have to say about why we're here and what we're doing here? And what we can see in the biblical narrative is that these answers, or these questions are given answers. These questions are given answers that we can reason through to understand why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing. So I do believe it is indeed fair that if one is going to profess that there is a God, if one is going to assert that there is a God, and then they're going to say, okay, here's the reason why I believe that there is a God, and they're going to use the biblical narrative to explain why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing, then it seems reasonable to me that other people should also understand that position. And I think this is oftentimes where we lose each other. We're so busy arguing back and forth about the points that we're trying to make that we're missing each other and we're passing each other like ships in the night. We have to stop doing that, and we have to be willing to have a dialogue to understand each other's positions, truly understand each other's positions, and not even in an effort just to reply to somebody's position in an effort to win an argument, but to truly have a genuine interest and desire in pursuing truth wherever it leads us. If that's the case, then I would encourage anybody that is arguing against someone that thinks that there is a creator, well, then understand the position of what that creator has to say about what we're doing here, and why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing while we're here. I think this is a point. I'm going a little bit beyond what John Lennox said, but I think this is implied in his point, that is, if there indeed is a creator, then we should know about what he's saying about why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing here. The last point that we'll make in this video, and essentially the last point that John Lennox makes in this clip, is an incredible claim. It is a very interesting and intriguing claim. The fact that if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then Christianity is false. We have no leg to stand on if Jesus didn't rise from the dead. However, if Jesus did indeed rise from the dead, then Christianity is true. We don't have people just resurrecting themselves on their own power because they are claiming to be God. We don't have these things happening. So this is the ultimate display of one who can make the claim that he is indeed God. If he's risen from the dead, then Christianity is true, and it should be followed then. What's the evidence that Jesus rose from the dead? Well, there's different types of evidence, and there's different types of arguments to make, and we actually have a video titled The Minimal Facts Argument that makes the argument of Jesus rising from the dead and why we believe that to be the case. However, John Lennox just gives one simple explanation that to this day we still can stand on, and I think that people will need to provide a rational answer for. The response that he gave is the empty tomb. Jesus' tomb is empty. And to this day, we still don't have his body. So if his tomb is empty and nobody is able to produce a body, this is something very serious that those that don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead need to be able to reconcile. And I understand that there have been some responses given to the swoon theory, and there are responses, stolen body, that have been given. However, all of these have been widely debunked by many of the serious people that are seriously looking into these things and that are researching these things, that are studying these things. None of these theories really give a proper explanation that goes truly convincing beyond a reasonable doubt for obviously billions of people that believe that Jesus indeed rose from the dead. Professor John Lennox in this clip, that's where he ends with the empty tomb, but this 10 minutes straight of just giving absolute rational arguments of understanding why there indeed is a God and capping it off with Jesus and the empty tomb. It's brilliant from Professor John Lennox. We don't expect anything less. He's a brilliant mind. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll continue doing these reaction videos. We really enjoy being able to see the debates and the different thoughts that come out from some of these leading minds on these philosophical topics. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel for more videos. Make sure you like this video if you did get some value out of it. If you enjoyed listening to this and you got some value out of it, I certainly hope that you did. Make sure you leave a like. Drop your comment down below of other videos that you'd like to see. And until next time, we'll see you.